Hey everyone, what's going on? If you're new to the channel, please check out some links in the description and you'll understand a lot more of what I am talking about in this video. You can easily learn to apply the esoteric knowledge practice of gematria that I'm going to be talking about here, which is the practice of coding numbers into words and phrases. And the narrative that I am talking about here is something that I've been talking about since 2015. I have a playlist with I could probably put more videos in here, but I just put more videos in here the other day with 19 videos showing this narrative that I've been following since 2015. And the reason for this video is because on February 13th, we got a major news story about a 9.0 earthquake that, well, it was a 7.1 earthquake that hit Japan. And it was supposedly an aftershock of the 9.0 earthquake that hit in 2011. But what's so interesting about the date 213 is that in this language of gematria, if you write out the word earthquake with a capital E, it just so happens to equal 213. And what's even more interesting is the date 213 just so happens to be the 44th day of the year. So we get this big earthquake in Japan on the 44th day of the year that is 213, and the word earthquake equals 44 and 213. And if you go back to my post on January 13th, I also talked about how the upcoming Royal Rumble, think about Royal Rumble in regards to earthquakes, was important to Los Angeles, Japan, and earthquakes. And I'll explain a little bit more here as we move along, but I just want to show you. Down here I talked about, will 2021 be the year of the bridge earthquake I followed for so long? Japan was also important, or Japan was important too. And, so what are the odds? Then we get a giant earthquake in Japan, less than a month later, or about exactly a month later. I mean, think about it. Royal Rumble. The royal family of England is also very important to this that I'll eventually come back and talk about here. But, if you recall, in 2018 they had the greatest Royal Rumble that was in Saudi Arabia. And then later that year they had the Crown Jewel. And there was a helicopter crash of the owner of the soccer team, King Power, the soccer team that plays in King Power Stadium, and it was synced up to Prince Philip, and now Prince Philip's in the news, just after Prince Harry and Meghan Markle announced they're having another child, and I will explain more about this as we move along, but let's go back to kind of the very beginning here. So, if you go to this playlist, since 2015 I've been documenting about the number 34 with Ronda Rousey, and just everything about her was synced up to the number 34. Right after Roddy Piper, the WWE wrestler, died, the very next day, Ronda Rousey won her fight in 34 seconds. And, where she fought was on, the 34 degrees north or something like that, and a whole bunch of other things. I can't even remember it all, but, just a ton of stuff. And I also mentioned how Kobe Bryant was important to this narrative, and Kobe Bryant later would die at 3 months and 4 days into the NBA season that I also predicted in July would be all synced up to Kobe Bryant, and then Kobe Bryant ended up dying, and it was synced up to Dwight Howard rejoining the team. And then, it was way before Dwight Howard even joined the team, I mentioned that I think Dwight Howard is important to this narrative, and he might become a Laker, and then he ended up becoming a Laker on Kobe Bryant's 41st birthday, and Kobe Bryant ends up dying 157 days later, and Kobe Bryant equals 41 and 157. And, he died right after Dwight Howard turned 34 years old, and Kobe tore his Achilles when he was age 34 and couldn't play with Shaq, who wore the number 34, and a whole lot more. But Kobe Bryant, think about Kobe Bryant in regards to Japan, too. Kobe Bryant, Japan, Japanese beef. Kobe was also originally from Philadelphia. And remember, just after he died, the day after LeBron broke his scoring record, making LeBron third in scoring and Kobe fourth, 3-4. And LeBron did that against the Philadelphia 76ers. And there's just so much going on with it. I talked about Hulk Hogan, who was also in the news in 2015 for saying the N-word right after Roddy Piper died, and then Ronda Rousey won her fight, and then took on the name Rowdy Ronda Rousey. And Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper had a feud. Remember, Hulk Hogan, he got his ribs broke against the wrestler named Earthquake, and then he got his revenge against him in Philadelphia at the Spectrum. And, of course, the capital of the country, Jordan, used to be called Philadelphia, and till the year 106 AD, and it was destroyed by earthquakes. And think about Michael Jordan, and think about Kobe Bryant, and Michael Jordan now owns the Charlotte Hornets, who play in the Spectrum, and, you know, a whole lot more. But it led up to 2019 when the Toronto Raptors won the NBA Finals, and then SummerSlam was going to be held on August 11th, which is Hulk Hogan's birthday. A big day we were following in regards to a possible earthquake in San Francisco and so on. And, you know, no big earthquake happened, but it was still synced up to all kinds of other narratives that were going on. And it's really where I learned the importance of these Francis Bacon ciphers. And let's just look at these Francis Bacon ciphers. This is why Los Angeles is so important to the narrative too. Earthquake 213. I've also pointed out how Los Angeles equals 213 in these Francis Bacon ciphers, and Los Angeles is in the 213 area code, and Kobe Bean Bryant also equals 213, and the NBA Finals equal 213. Remember last year, the Lakers went on to win after Kobe Bryant died, and they won on Father-Daughter Day, and Kobe Bryant died in the helicopter with his daughter and so on, but they beat the Miami Heat, and Heat equal 34, and that was LeBron James's former team, and a whole lot more, you know, but I'm just pointing out. Los Angeles, 213 in the 213 area code, Los Angeles, prone to earthquakes. If you go back to 2019, I talked about this narrative with the Lakers and Luke Walton becoming the coach of the Kings, and LeBron King James, and coronavirus means crown, or corona means crown, and Kobe got buried in Corona del Mar and had the crown tattoo on him. But in 2019, I was following that same narrative with the King stuff, and I talked about how there was something really important that year to the Angel of Independence statue in Los Angeles, the City of Angels. And then on Independence Day, we got a major earthquake in Los Angeles, and that was the same day Kawhi Leonard shook up Los Angeles and went to the Clippers instead of the Lakers and so on, and Clippers equal 44 like earthquake, and a whole lot more. But within this narrative, and Toronto holding SummerSlam last year, and Toronto being the team that Kobe scored 81 points against, I pointed out how Toronto Raptors equal 224. And this was even before they even won the NBA Finals. I talked about how it was synced up, and then Kevin Durant tore his Achilles 3 months or I can't remember what it was. I think it was 3 months and 4 days before August 11th, or something along the lines of that. It was something to do with 34. And, you know, but Toronto Raptors 224. Look at Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant equals 224 in the Francis Bacon ciphers. And this is why they had his tribute on 224, and his daughter wore number 2 and he wore number 24. And they had that episode called The Legend of Chamberlain Heights, where Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash, that cartoon, and that cartoon came out 2 months and 24 days after Kobe Bryant's birthday. And also Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan equals 224 in these ciphers. So think about, once again, Philadelphia used to be the capital of the country, Jordan, until it was destroyed by earthquakes. Philadelphia actually comes from the Bible, you know, or it's in Revelation and so on, right? Where they talk about the Church of Philadelphia. So anyway, there's this whole big narrative, and I'm following all this stuff with the number 34 and Kobe Bryant and Ronda Rousey. Then Kobe Bryant ends up dying synced up to the number 34, and Ronda Rousey ends up coming out at the Royal Rumble in 2018 that was held in Philadelphia, and she didn't wrestle, but she came out and she just pointed up at the Wrestlemania sign, hinting that she was going to make her official WWE debut at Wrestlemania 34. And she did, and she came out dressed like Roddy Piper, and a whole lot more. But she ended up making her Wrestlemania, or her wrestling debut at Wrestlemania 34, after she points at the thing in Philadelphia. So I knew this narrative was, still ongoing. But if you go back and watch that Royal Rumble, the people who won it, it was the first time there was a women's Royal Rumble and a men's Royal Rumble. And both the people who won it were from Japan. And I pointed out, that's interesting with Kobe Bryant and Japan, and, 2018, they were both from Japan. And then a few months later, Ronda Rousey makes her debut at WrestleMania 34, and she fights Shane McMahon, she doesn't fight Shane McMahon, she fights Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, and this whole narrative went back to WrestleMania 31. At WrestleMania 31, that was held in San Francisco, which was the important area we were talking about with August 11th, the same day that SummerSlam was held in Toronto, but in 2019. But WrestleMania 31 held in San Francisco, the wrestler The Rock brought Ronda Rousey onto the ring to help him fight Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. And she didn't actually end up fighting, but that was how the whole narrative led to her joining the WWE 3 years later, right? And think about The Rock, who after WrestleMania 31, the movie called San Andreas came out. Think about San Andreas and earthquakes, San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge. But in that movie, The Rock just so happens to be a helicopter pilot. And just before, the summer before WrestleMania 34, Shane McMahon, the son of the owner of the WWE, Vince McMahon, Shane McMahon was in a helicopter crash and survived. And then just before Kobe Bryant died, on Shane McMahon's birthday, The Rock's father died, right? So The Rock's father dies on Shane McMahon's birthday, just before Kobe Bryant dies. And, there's a whole lot more, because Shane McMahon, The Rock's father, his birthday just so happens to be the same day as Vince McMahon, and then he ends up dying on Shane McMahon's birthday, and Vince McMahon's birthday is August 24th, 8/24, like Kobe Bryant's numbers, and, there's a whole other narrative that goes along with it. But also in the year 2018, there was the greatest Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia. Yeah, it was in 2018, I'm pretty sure. There was the greatest Royal Rumble in April in Saudi Arabia. And then 189 days later, there was the Crown Jewel that was also held in Saudi Arabia. And think about that in regards to the royal family, right? And what I documented way back then was that it was synced up to Prince Philip. And Prince Philip now is in the media today for being hospitalized. And it's so funny because in Gematria, Prince Philip, I'll write it out here, Prince Philip, his name just so happens to equal 189. And notice how the word earthquake also equals 189? And I talked about how the greatest Royal Rumble, royal family Royal Rumble, remember Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, they also left the royal family on Kim Jong-un's birthday in 2020, causing a little bit of a Royal Rumble, but Earthquake 189, Prince Philip 189. The greatest Royal Rumble was 189 days before the Crown Jewel. Also, just before the Crown Jewel, there was the Lion Air crash, right? It was Lion Air 610. And I pointed out this was interesting because 610 is Prince Philip's birthday. And just before this, or I think this Lion Air crash, it had 189 people on board. That was part of it. It had 189 people on board, but right around the same time as this, it was 189 days after Queen Elizabeth's birthday, the owner of the soccer team that plays in King Power had died, and he died in a helicopter crash, right? And then at the Crown Jewel, Shane McMahon was actually in the Crown Jewel. Shane McMahon hadn't wrestled, really. I haven't really heard of Shane McMahon that much. And, Crown Jewel. But at the Crown Jewel, can't even find it here. There it goes. At the Crown Jewel, Shane McMahon beats Dolph Ziggler. Right, it was like a cage match, if I remember correctly. But Shane McMahon, he fights in the Crown Jewel right after the King Power guy dies in a helicopter crash 189 days later. And I also pointed out how Royal Family equals 189 in the Francis Bacon ciphers. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but we just had the story on February 15th about Kenny Chesney's friend dying in a helicopter crash. And there's something important to it. He's from Knoxville, Tennessee, and his friend was Maria Rodriguez. And look at her name in Gematria. If I can get it here. But Maria Rodriguez. Oh, it equals 213, like earthquake. I thought it equaled 189, but there's still something significant to it. I don't know what it is, but he's from Knoxville, Tennessee, and well, here's a post where I just want to show you really quick. A post January 27th where I talked about the word earthquake equaling 213. I talked about Kobe Bryant and a bunch of stuff, but Knoxville. Let me type that out really quick. Did I put it in this post? Yeah. Well, there's some interesting things going on with the winners of the Royal Rumble, and this year, in 2021, the winner of the Royal Rumble was Bianca Belair, right? Reminding us of Los Angeles and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And remember, Will Smith was also synced up to Kobe Bryant and so on. Will Smith, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Think about how the only actor that's on that show who's died is Uncle Phil, and, Philip, and so on. And he died just before Philip Seymour Hoffman was announced dead at the Super Bowl pregame where the guy named Philip Phillips was singing, and there's something important to it, but Bianca Belair is from Knoxville. So I don't know, I have to figure this out, but I guarantee there's something important to this lady dying in a helicopter crash, being friends with Kenny Chesney, who's from Knoxville, Tennessee. And we just had the RV bombing that was in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was all synced to Anthony Quinn Warner and so on. And Becky Lynch, I don't know if she won the Royal Rumble this year. I can't remember. I have to read it through here. But Becky Lynch's real name is Rebecca Quinn, something that I've been following. If you follow some of my previous videos. And the guy who won the men's Royal Rumble this year was the wrestler named Edge, and he just so happens to be from Toronto, right? Edge, he was from Toronto, and what sticks out about this to me is that if you go back to these videos, so in 2018, right after Ronda Rousey came out at the Royal Rumble in Philadelphia and said she was going to wrestle at WrestleMania 34, we later had the Stoneman Douglas shooting, right? And then Philadelphia won the Super Bowl. Something I had talked about pretty much all year. Synced up to, crazy stuff. My grandma and a bunch of stuff. Hopefully, I'm going to talk about that again in a different video. But we had that. And then right after that, in March that year, we had another school shooting in Maryland. And Maryland equals 34, right? That big number that I was talking about. And the shooter's name was Austin Wyatt Rollins, reminding us of Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bray Wyatt and Seth Rollins, the wrestlers. And a few days after that happened, or a couple weeks or something, we had the Austin Bomber, who ended up getting caught because of his pink gloves. And then we later found out that the wrestler Mark Henry knew a victim that was in the Austin bombing, and it was all synced up to Mark Henry. And so on. I can't remember the exact numbers. I think it was something to do with 612, a big number that's important to all the school shootings and whatnot. But it was synced to Mark Henry, the wrestler. And I pointed out that there was the St. Valentine's Day massacre that I remembered as a kid, where Mark Henry wrestled Owen Hart, the wrestler. And Owen Hart, he just so happened to die at the age of 34 later that year at a pay-per-view called Over the Edge. And during this same time, we got this story about this family who drove over the cliff in California, right? So we had Over the Cliff, and then we have Over the Edge, and it's synced up to Owen Hart. And I know it was important because one of the kids that was in that was supposedly in the news in 2014 at the Michael Brown shooting, and he got famous for hugging a cop because he was a black kid hugging a white cop, and they were showing, you know, how, whatever, it wasn't all about race or something. I don't exactly remember the whole narrative, but the cop's name was Sergeant, what was it? It was Sergeant Bret Hart, and if you look up Bret Hart, Owen Hart's brother, his name just so happens to be Bret Sergeant Hart. So I knew there was this significance to that family driving over the cliff synced up to Owen Hart, who died at Over the Edge, right? Over the edge of the cliff. And he fought Mark Henry at the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, reminding us of the Stoneman Douglas shooting. I know it's so deep, but, you know, you got to come watch these other videos. And moral of the story, as you get farther into this, you know, well, even then, like remember there was the Ides of March shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand too, the next year, and I pointed out after the mail package bomber later in 2018, how there was something important to the Ides of March. We should watch the Ides of March because, you know, the Austin bomber was named Mark Anthony Condit, and then the mail package bomber was named Caesar Sayoc. Think about Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, and Julius Caesar died on the Ides of March, and then on the Ides of March in 2019, we got the Christchurch Mosque shooting, or bombing, or whatever it was. And what's funny about that is the only other time I documented about cliffs on my blog, I documented about a cliff that collapsed in Christchurch, New Zealand in 2015 due to an earthquake. But anyway, I know it is so deep, but after the Stoneman Douglas shooting, and then we had that Maryland shooting and the Austin bomber stuff, in, I think it was June of that year, there was a major news story about how a newspaper place got shot up in Maryland, right? A newspaper place, and so the news gets shot up, just like the movie They Live with Roddy Piper. And in 2015, recall, Roddy Piper died. The very next day, Ronda Rousey won her fight in 34 seconds. And then, what? Right, at the August 27th that year, 2015, there was the Bridgewater shooting. And that just so happened to be a guy who shot up the news crew, right? So, I mean, and in the movie They Live, Roddy Piper shoots up the news crew, you know, and the band Disturbed had released a song earlier that year called The Vengeful One, and they mimicked the movie They Live where they shot up the news people. And I've talked about this in a previous video, but I mean, you know, what are the odds? A news people shooting right in Maryland of all places, synced up to all these people. Stone Cold Steve Austin, also the reason he had to retire was because of a botched pile driver by the wrestler Owen Hart. And Steve Austin came back like 316 days later. Think about Austin 316 and just a bunch of ridiculousness. But, you know, this playlist this is why the Lakers, what was it, I can't remember this, but Cliff Robinson, the former Portland Trailblazer, he died like right before the Lakers knocked out the Portland Trailblazers in the opening round of the playoffs of 2020, right? The team that Kobe Bryant synced up to. The City of Roses, and think about Valentine's Day, and I mean, it's just craziness. In Gematria, Japan also equals 185, and Ronda Jean Rousey equals 185, and I can't remember, I could look it up, but that Bridgewater shooting, I think Bridgewater or Monetta, Virginia, or one of them, a whole bunch of stuff with 185 with that. So, you know, Ronda Rousey 185, Japan 185. Talked a whole lot about how the movie They Live is important to this, and They Live equals 218, and The 218th day in 2018 was also really important. That was the day Alex Jones got kicked off of social media, the same day that Pink, the singer, was in the news, and there was a huge narrative with the color pink. That's why the Austin bomber wore pink gloves. And if you look up the films Pretty in Pink, the film Pretty in Pink is by stars Molly Ringwald, who's born on 2/18, and the writer of that movie was John Hughes, who died on August 6th, the 218th day, and his birthday was 2/18. And August 6th is also the day of the Hiroshima bombing, right, in World War and so on in Japan. August 6th is also the day that World Trade Center construction began in the year 68. So August 6th, very important day. And this number 218, also very important. So I'm going to be watching this day like crazy. I've talked about how it's synced up to my life, and 218 is now today. So we'll see what goes down. We'll see. Probably nothing, you know. Every time I seem to mention it, it's always just another piece to the narrative. It's never some big event, but it's always like this date that all kinds of things will sync up to, if that makes sense, if you pay enough attention. The earthquake was also in Japan. It was 192 days and also 6 months and 8 days after August 6th. In Japan, and the Francis Bacon equals 68. Ronda Jean Rousey also equals 68. Rowdy Ronda Rousey equals 192. Roddy Piper equals 192. So when all this stuff with Kobe Bryant. Yeah, 2019, the winners of the Royal Rumble were Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch. That's why I talked about Becky Lynch down here, and her real name being Rebecca Quinn, reminding me of Anthony Quinn Warner. Synced up. It's just a narrative I've been following. You gotta watch some previous videos, but she's currently 34, and Seth Rollins is currently 34. And the 2020 winners, Drew McIntyre was 34 years old when he won, and Charlotte Flair turned 34 the same day as WrestleMania 36 that year. So she's still 34 years old. And then this year it was Bianca Belair, reminding me of Los Angeles. And then Edge, right? And what's even more interesting about Edge and this earthquake, they say it's an aftershock from the earthquake in 2011. Edge got injured, supposedly, that's his story, and he had to retire from wrestling for pretty much until recently. But he retired just after the earthquake in Japan in 2011. Right? So Edge wins. Also, in regards to the RV bombing, I've talked about how that was synced up to Batman, right? And the Anthony Quinn Warner was from Antioch, Tennessee. And I'll leave that link in the description too. It's so much to talk about. But in 2015, right around the same time that Ronda Rousey won her fight in 34 seconds, there was a shooting in Antioch, Tennessee, right? At the Mad Max film, reminding us of the Batman shooting from 2012. And in 2015, in August, right around that same time, Donald Trump said he was Batman in a helicopter at the Iowa State Fair. And then we had Batgirl Yvonne Craig die, and a guy who dressed up like Batman and went around the hospitals die. And we had Morgan Freeman's granddaughter die, and they showed us a picture of him and her at the Batman premiere. But Antioch is where the term Christian comes from, and Christian Bale is Batman in them films, and then Christian Bale is also, Tom Hardy is the actor who plays Bane in that movie, and Tom Hardy just so happens to be Mad Max in the film Mad Max that got shot up in 2015 in Antioch, right? There's this just a humongous narrative. That's why the guy from Mad Max died back in December, too. Just before the RV bombing, because it was all synced up to this. But in regards to Edge, the wrestler, he's famous for his tag team partner named Christian, right? So it just reminds me of the whole narrative with the RV bombing and Batman. And This date, August 6th, I've been talking about it, 2022, was on August 6th. Tisha B'Av begins that day. It's just a very, very important day, I think, of the Tiger year and so on. But, you know, Skyfall equals 86, and Aurora, Colorado, James Egan Holmes equals 86, the guy who supposedly shot up, you know, the Batman shooting, Bane 86, Christian Bale 86. Wrestlemania 37 this year is going to be held in Tampa, which is where the Toronto Raptors are playing their games this season, but it was supposed to be held in Los Angeles, right? And it makes sense, WrestleMania 37 held in Los Angeles, and the wrestler Christian just so happens to live in Tampa, right? So Christian lives in Tampa, where the Toronto Raptors are playing their games, and then Edge is from Toronto, right? There's some narrative that's going on. And then, of course, Tampa Bay was synced up to the Tiger King, and the hockey team went on to win the Stanley Cup, and then the Tampa Bay Rays lost in the World Series, and then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win the Super Bowl. This earthquake in Japan was also 107 days after Edge's birthday. And the word earthquake also equals 107. So, let's go back and look at the Prince Philip story here. So Prince Philip's now in the news just after the helicopter crash story of Kenny Chesney that's just, I have to look more into, but notice this story comes 63 days before Queen Elizabeth's birthday. It also comes 8 months and 7 days after his birthday. And if you write out Prince Philip, it equals 63. If you write out Queen Elizabeth II, it equals 87. So, synced up to her, synced up to him. It comes just after Prince Harry and Meghan Markle announced they're having another baby. And what's so interesting about them announcing that, they announced that on the date 2/14, which was Valentine's Day, which if you look up in history, that's also the day that the news came out that Princess Diana was going to be having her second child, who was Prince Harry, right? So now they're announcing Prince Harry's going to be having his second child on the same day that he was announced that he was going to be born. 2/14, and it was 214 days before his birthday. And Prince Harry equals 2/14, Meghan Markle equals 2/14. Story comes 214 days before Prince Harry's birthday. It comes on 2/14. It also comes 7 months and 2 days before his birthday. Prince Harry equals 72. Prince Philip equals 63. Prince Harry 63. Meghan Markle 63. The story comes 6 months and 10 days after Meghan Markle's birthday. Prince Philip's birthday 6/10. And I've been following a Prince Philip narrative earlier this year too, synced up to all this AI stuff. And Allen Iverson and Philadelphia. So, synced up to the movie Blade Runner that has the horse that has the date or the numbers 6/10/21, a lot like the date 6/10/21, which will be Prince Philip's 100th birthday. And the word Philip actually means somebody who loves horses, right? If you look up the etymology of the name Philip, it means lover of horses, right? Think about this, the Blade Runner film with the horse with his birthday on it, right? His 100th birthday. All that was synced up to a rose theme, and think about Valentine's Day, so. I also just recently watched in regards to AI kind of stuff, and I recently just watched the movie Johnny Mnemonic for the first time ever, and that movie just so happens to take place in the year 21, and it begins on January 17th, which just sticks out to me because that's the day they said Anthony Quinn Warner was born, the RV bomber. But it's also a date or a number that I've talked a whole lot about in regards to bridges. The word bridge equals 117. A lot like January 17th. And I believe, doesn't the word bridge also equal, I'm trying to remember here, in the English extended, or the word bridge in Jewish equals 107, Like earthquake, that's what it was. So, there's some narrative there. I don't know I'm not sure of the full, what's going on with it, but there's definitely some narrative with the year 21 and AI, and I'm talking about all this, and then Zach makes the video about Sophia, right? Sophia, the robots that they're going to start mass producing in the year 21. It's also interesting that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, Meghan supposedly had a miscarriage back in July, and they didn't announce this until November 25th this year, or 2020. And if you go from that date to the day they announced their second child, it's 2 months and 20 days. And Prince Charles equals 220, something I pointed out for a really long time. It's also big numbers synced up to the Jesuit theme, right? Pope Francis's birthday is 2 months and 20 days after the Jesuit anniversary. And the Jesuits were, they were made the Jesuits by the 220th Pope named Pope Paul. And once again, these Francis Bacon ciphers is Paul III, the 220th Pope, and his name equals 220. And some other ones, in regards to this, like Society of Jesus equals 187, right? 191, so on. And look at Prince Harry and the Francis Bacon ciphers, 187. I mean, look at Prince Philip, 187. That's why I'm telling you, these ciphers are super important, right? It's also 80, Prince Philip equals 81, and, think about how that's 81 days. Wherever I put it here. It's also 81 days. Remember, 2018, too, was really important to this because Pope Francis turned 81 years old, and it was 81 days after the Jesuit anniversary. He's the first Jesuit Pope, and the word Pope in the Hebrew lettering equals 81, and the date 8/18/18 was 8 months and 1 day after Pope Francis's birthday, and Golden Gate equals 81. What we got here? Or Golden Gate Bridge equals 81, right? Frontwards and backwards. Interesting, it also equals 213. Holy cow, I never noticed that before. Wow. Earthquakes, Golden Gate Bridge. Haha, I've just learned something here, but it's crazy. Even like once again, I just want to show another example of the Francis Bacon ciphers. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, they both got their coronavirus vaccine on January 9th, the date that I was following like crazy, but notice it was a span of 264 days after Queen Elizabeth's birthday, and Queen Elizabeth II equals 264, but in the Francis Bacon ciphers, her son, who would become king if she dies, King Charles III equals 264. And he also equals 263. So it's a span of 263 days, or 64 days, but it's also 263 days. So she gets this vaccine 263 days or 264 days, right? And then that was a huge number, like the word vaccine equals 264, and figured out COVID-19, the way CNN always does it, equals 264. And can't even remember the first lady who got it. Her name equaled 264 in England or whatever. Can't think of what her name was. I could go back, but not going to. Oh, it's on here. Margaret Keenan, 264. Supposedly began in Seattle, Washington in the United States. Seattle, Washington, 264. I mean, just craziness. 263 is the 56th prime number. Coronavirus equals 56. Another reason to know the Francis Bacon ciphers. Donald John Trump, 263 in the Francis Bacon ciphers. Also 220. Think about how he's the president during the coronavirus pandemic, and he was the president. That equals 110, and Anthony Fauci guaranteed there would be a pandemic or whatever on the date January 10th, during the Donald Trump administration and so on, right? 110, the word Jesuit, 110, Donald Trump got coronavirus 110 days after his birthday and 110 days before Inauguration Day. Which, if you add that together, it's 220 days, you know. And then, of course, it was 5 months and 6 days after his wife's birthday, and then his son Barron got it like 5 months and 6 days before his birthday, and his other son got it 5 months and 6 days before or after his birthday, and on Joe Biden's birthday, and coronavirus equals 56. So, one other thing in regards to Prince Philip, and I'm just going to end the video here, it's long enough, but it's just interesting. We got a story about him right after I'm talking about the Ronda Rousey stuff and how it's synced up to this Japan earthquake and the Royal Rumble. I'm interested to see the Wrestlemania, but Prince Philip's 99 years old right now, and the United States of America equals 99. And I believe that it was actually called that on the date 9/9. That's where it got its name from. And it just stands out to me because before I even knew Gematria, I was always measuring dates and stuff from other channels, and, you know, I knew a little bit about Gematria, but, like, one of the first things I learned was, or I think it was before that, I don't know, but Prince Philip, his birth, he's exactly 1,776 days older than Queen Elizabeth, right? Reminding us of Independence Day in the United States and Britain, and, right? So now he's 99 years old, and the United States of America equals 99. It just seems there's something important to that. Also, in regards to the horse symbolism, right? Philip is a lover of horses, and right now we just went into the Chinese year of the ox, and the ox and the horse are the biggest enemies. So it would make sense to me that, you know, he could possibly die of the year of the ox, right? Since the horse and the ox don't get along. But we also just had Tom Brady, the GOAT, win in the year of the rat, or he became the GOAT in the year of the rat, and the GOAT and the rat are the biggest the biggest enemies as well. So, I guess the word miscarriage equals 220 in the Francis Bacon ciphers if you use the capital M as well. So, I think that's why I even wrote this in here, but. And, you know, even in regards to all this, so Derrick Rose also got traded to the Knicks. And if you go back to one of my posts or whatever, I was talking about how this narrative from 2015 was important again with Lupercalia and Teen Wolf and Valentine's Day and so on. And that involved Derrick Rose. And then now Derrick Rose gets traded to the Knicks. And the Knicks were this important team synced up to James Bond. You know, talked about all this stuff previously that was synced up to Batman and Sean Connery and the Moon and whatever else. So Derrick Rose gets traded to the Knicks. And that was important to MF Doom, who died the same day as Sean Connery. Right? MF Doom, the rapper. All synced up to the date 1/9. Tomorrow's going to be 1 month and 9 days after 1/9 as well, so. Well, let's leave it there. Really just wanted to show this, you gotta just watch the stuff in the playlist. It'll make a lot more sense. Otherwise I have to explain like 10 hours worth of stuff. I'm trying to make it very simple and the video's 45 minutes long, so. Even Bruce Springsteen, he was important to that Philadelphia stuff from 2015. His birthday's 9/23, something I pointed out a long time ago. And he just recently got a DWI, or that's what it said. You know, he got it in November. And they busted out now. I don't even know. I don't even like Bruce Springsteen, honestly. Born in the USA. It's about the only song I can really think of, so. But there's something important to it. The E Street Band. Streets of Philadelphia, where it shows the... Pretty sure on that video it shows the Ben Franklin Bridge. It's major bridge symbolism. Remember I talked about all this leading up to the bridge. It was all about the bridge symbolism that year in 2018 as well. And my son was born on January 17th, and a whole lot more. Then after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, there was the FIU bridge collapse. It was on the 44th mayor of San Francisco, Mark Farrell's birthday. And he turned 44 years old, and he became the mayor 4 months and 4 days before the anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge. Once again, the word earthquake equals 44. That happened on the Ides of March. Julius Caesar, what did he... Caesar, did he die at age 44 or in the year 44? Yeah, in the year 44. Dies at age 55 like God and Satan. And I'm just killing time here, but what's Julius Caesar equal? I haven't looked this up in a long time. Look at that. Julius Caesar. You know, a Jesuit number. Or that's what we, whatever. Doesn't have to be, but... And a Freemasonry number. It's a Ronda Rousey number. The 8-6 number, too. Man, I have to look more into Julius Caesar. Crazy. Hold on. We'll see what Gaius Julius Caesar equals. There's a lot of stuff, too, with this old Roman stuff. The 56 prime number. God, Jesus, cross, church. Interesting stuff here. But I won't bore you. Let's stay to the point. Have a good one. Peace.